Okay, so now we'll start the women's perspective. We have a great lineup here. Margie Benziger, she has been cruising with her husband, Peter. You heard from them yesterday if you were tuned in, so I'm excited to hear her stories. Pat Garfield. Pat is the owner of Farallon Yachts. She's done a lot of cruising. She's done the Transpac, has a great wealth of knowledge and experience to share with us. We also have Leonard. Michelle is a salesman with Atomic Tuna. And I'm Geli Burgin, you know, with Atomic Tuna as well. So we'll start with if we could have all the panelists start their videos, please. Do we have Eva Tanner?
I don't know how to do this.
Geli, can you hear me?
I can hear you, Margie.
All right, I'm working on it.
We're not quite sure where to do this. We don't see a video.
And we also have Eva Tanner. Eva Tanner's done a fair amount of cruising. She's been in the boating for about 30 years, I want to say.
Yeah,
also took her last passage was from Cape Town, South Africa to Florida. So we're excited to hear from her as well. Is everybody up?
Geli, we don't see a video check-in.
Margie needs a video.
I'm making you guys co-host.
And mine says unable to load to.
Oh, there's one.
This is Michelle. I'm waiting for to get in. I get an error.
Okay, well, they're working on getting Michelle.
I think that's it.
No, Margie's trying to get in as well.
Margie should be good.
I just saw Michelle.
I'm back.
She just has to do the video herself.
Am I muted?
No.
Can you look at her screen, Pat's screen? So while we're working on the technical difficulties, we'll give away another prize. Jessica Heineke, I hope I pronounced that correctly. You have just won an Atomic Tuna hat. Thank you for participating and joining with day 2 of our virtual boat show.
Margie's got to start her own video. Margie has to start her own video.
Margie, could you please?
She's the one.
You can start and we'll work.
Okay.
We don't see an option to click a video button.
So Eva, we'll start with you. Could you please give us a background about yourself?
Oh, I've been sailing for, I guess, 40 years, something like 40 years. After.
Since you were 10?
Thank you for the compliment. No, I actually was a no. I already had a child and was married. I liked it. I got into sailing by deciding I needed something new and very different after a divorce. So I joined the single sailing in Oakland by Lake Merritt. I don't even know if that still exists. And got the experience that changed a lot of things in my life. I like to continue with the sailing and went on from there. The rest is history.
So they had like a meetup type of forum back then. I didn't know that.
The good old days.
Those were the good old days.
So Pat, can you give us like your history and how'd you get into boating?
Well, I have a wonderful picture here in the office, actually, of my father having a 60-foot sailboat, a ketch, in Hawaii. It was actually a Transpac boat, and he's holding me in his arms standing by the mizzen, and I was 1 year old. So that's my first real sailing experience. We lived in Hawaii. I grew up there till I was 5. Throughout my life, I was in Mariner Scouts for quite a while, as an instructor and as a leader, and taught at the Balboa Bay Club, and then went into corporate world for 20 plus years, and didn't do any sailing at all, and realized that it was time to get back into it. That's when I bought the Catalina 470, and quickly after that, the company. So that's kind of the short story.
So it's interesting with Pat, when we started working together, we both have the same corporate background. Both of us are J&Jers.
Yes, that's right.
Spent a few years, so I didn't do a lot of sailing back then either.
Yeah, other priorities.
Other priorities. Michelle, are you on right now?
I am.
Okay, could you please give us your background and how did you get into sailing?
I got into sailing in college. I got a PE credit, 1 hour PE credit for taking Sailing 101, and just fell in love with it at that point. And so I graduated from college and bought a used car and a used boat. And I started with a Hobie 14. And when I bought it, I'd only been on a Hobie Cat one time before, and drove over from where I was living in Jefferson City, Missouri to St. Louis, Missouri, picked up a boat, brought it home, didn't even know if I had all the parts. Luckily, boat people are great people. So I had exactly the number of parts I needed to put that boat together the first time. And I had that boat. And then since then, I've had about 11 or so other boats that I can count. And just love boating, love it in every single way, which is kind of what brought me to.
That's great. So I didn't realize you started that young and you actually started in college. Quick check, is Margie in?
I'm here, but I'm not visual.
So Margie, could you please give us your background and how did you get into sailing?
Hello? Yeah.
Well, I got into sailing sort of accidentally, very late in life, well, 28 years old when I met Peter. I don't think I'd been on a boat maybe 1 or 2 times in my life. And I realized by the second date that there wouldn't be a third unless I expressed an interest in sailing. So of course I did. And I learned how to sail and learned how to race. We had a Pearson 26 for several years in Puerto Rico, and then bought a J24. Few years after we got married, Peter announced that he'd always wanted to sail around the world. And I said, oh my God, I bought into that too. But once again, we made it happen. And it was the best experience of my life.
Oh, that's awesome. And you guys cruised for 9 years, right?
We did. We left
I'm
Miami
hitting the,
January 5th, 2010. And
I'm
we
hitting
sailed
the
around
start
the
video
world
button and it
in
doesn't work.
5 years, and
It says you cannot start your video. It says you cannot start your video because the host has stopped it.
left boat in Panama, thinking maybe we would sell it. Went back to Miami for a couple of months and said, no, this isn't our life.
Okay.
So we jumped back on the boat, went through the
Okay.
Panama Canal a second time, and up the Pacific coast of Central America, and into the Sea of Cortez for a couple of years. And then we made our way up to San Francisco, November of 2008.
Margie, did we lose you?
I don't know. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm really sorry.
No, that's okay. We'll keep going. We can hear you. Sorry, we can't see you, but hopefully we can fix that.
My technical assistant is working on that.
Okay. So a little bit about myself. I got introduced to sailing, I think when I was in middle school. My mom and my stepdad purchased a Dufour. So when I came out to visit from Minnesota, land of 10,000 lakes and more, we came out and saw the bay. At first I didn't like it because you couldn't water ski behind the sailboat. So it took me a few years to really learn to love sailing. And then I started to follow the Maiden, America True, and I saw all these women out there doing, team building and all this fabulous racing. I've always been into sports myself. So that really got me interested and started racing and as a volunteer with crew with Incidental Yacht Club and the beer can races, weekend races. And eventually the Johnson & Johnson, the typical career, no time. And then about 2011, I was able to get back into it.
That's great.
So Pat, do you have any, when I first wanted to get into sales, I guess it was around 2011, 2012, I was discouraged because it's pretty much a male dominated industry, told that it probably wouldn't be successful. And can you tell us a little bit about yourself, any challenges, and how you became one of the most successful brokers in the Bay Area?
Well, thanks. Well, the minute someone tells you you can't be successful is probably my big hot button. It's an automatic after that, And I think, women have always had challenges in, moving in a men's world. What I found was that, the more experience I got, the more I could speak from experience, the more successful I was at boat sales. A big reason why I did the Transpac was people would come into the office and say, it's just my husband and and I don't think we can handle a boat that big. And, Catalinas aren't really seagoing Class A boats anyway. So I thought, a couple of old women, we were both AARP at the time, took on that challenge of the Transpac from Los Angeles to Honolulu. And it took my experience level up a bunch, and it helped me relate to the customers better, because when they asked about, what happens in a knockdown, what happens, all the different experiences that you have. So I found that to be really helpful. And, I think women get challenged, just like you were saying, you have somebody say you can't do it. And, then you hunker down, you work harder. You want to be the best. And so you build the skills to make you the best. And I've watched you, and I think you're going to be very successful. You've got the right attitude. And I think it's relating to the customer and just kind of hunkering down and working hard. It's not a part-time job. It's not you're learning the hard knocks. It's 7 days a week, 12 hours a day. And just when you sit down for that cocktail, the phone rings and you're answering it. That's part of it.
Well, I appreciate the mentorship. I know Michelle and I both have learned a lot from you and look forward to working with you in the future. Eva, how many years have you been a captain?
Maybe 2 years ago, I renewed my second time. So 7-8 years that I have my license.
And what made you want to go from just a casual sailor cruiser to get your captain's license?
The curiosity. I've always been someone that wanted to, maybe competitiveness, if I could say. It was primarily people that I knew were always males that had that position. And I felt I needed to be equal in knowledge and understanding what I was getting into. Safety and personal satisfaction came with that, knowing what the reality is.
Right, and I think that's, and what are some of your experiences, places you've been, deliveries that you've had as a captain? Can you share some stories with us?
Well, there's a couple of them. One of them was when we were cruising to South America. We were in Mexico, and we had my husband and one male crew. We came in to check into the port, and the authority came and instantly looked at the two guys and said, Capitan, looking at one of them, And then they looked at each other, and then they both pointed at me and guys laughed and said, "Oh, El Capitana." Realizing it's a male-dominated society there, but it happens here as well. We were boarded by the Coast Guard at one point, and one of the fellows looked down the cockpit, the companionway, where I happened to be, and he said, "You would know what kind of an engine this is." "Oh, that's okay. I'll ask your husband." Not so hot with me. But the Farfagnugan. So he sort of looked at me a bit stunned, and I said, "Farfagnugan stands for Volkswagen. It's a Pathfinder. And by the way, we have a bell." He was sitting right on the side where my bell was. I was so mad, I rang that bell, and I said, "Our sound device also." But the assumption that a woman does not know is a wee bit tender for me. Yeah.
Right. Thanks for sharing that.
We had a funny experience, to interject into your story of who the captain is. We had a funny story. We were taking the Stevens down to a Bar Navidad, and we stopped in Turtle Bay to pick up some lobsters, and they said, "Oh, go around the corner," because you kind of have to do it on the sly. And the Pongas came up, and the guy says, "Well, where are your husbands?" There were 3 captains, all women, and the guys on the Ponga said, "Where are your husbands?" And one of the gals went. It was kind of because their eyes got big, and we did get 12 lobsters for a dirty T-shirt, some M&Ms, and a case of, or not a case, but a 6-pack of Pacifico.
Oh, nice. Michelle, what made you want to, could you talk about a little bit of your experience? I know you're a captain as well. What made you want to get into sales, and how have you been successful in bringing or helping women buyers, prospective women buyers that you have?
Yeah, so I got my captain's license 3 years ago. And I have to say, even after going through college, that was one of the hardest tests I've ever taken. And it was a pretty intensive training as well. But that's really why I went after it, is I wanted to learn more. And that was my goal, is to learn as much as I had. And at that time, I didn't have another goal. I just wanted to learn more about boats, and how could I be better at managing my own boat. And so it was a great experience. And then just last year, I guess now it's been 2 years ago, a friend of mine said, you know a lot about boats, and you are really good at talking to people. Why don't you try selling boats? And I'm like, really? You think? And he's like, yeah, I'll train you. I'll help you. And I ended up working with Patty and AJ Gust, and learned as much as I could. And I really do enjoy helping people find the right boat for them. And that usually means being a good listener, really paying attention to what are they saying, what are their fears, and what are their dreams, so that if they do have fears, like Patty said, if you've got a female that isn't as encouraged to buy a boat, you help them figure out why they don't like it, and maybe you can get around that. So it's really about helping people find a good boat. And I have to say, I've sold almost to as many women as I have men. And I think it's easier for a woman to relate to another woman in the sales experience. They don't feel like their questions are being pandered and, put down or whatever. They're not, they feel more comfortable asking the questions like, why does the head smell so bad? Can we do something about that? Maybe they wouldn't ask the man about that, a man salesman. But anyway, I really do enjoy relating to my customers and helping them and getting them into a boat and making their dream come true.
That's great. I noticed that in sales, especially when you have couples, as soon as the male goes into the engine room and they're looking at all the electronics, the engines, the generator, water maker, and the woman is just not interested.
Yeah, eyes glaze over.
Yeah. So
I have a good experience with that recently, though, is that I had 2 pilots that I met, 2 women pilots in their 30s, and they were looking for a boat. And they were very hands-on and very active in getting into the engine room and looking underneath. And they were telling me stories too about somebody had worked on their car and said, well, I don't want to go into too much detail and go over your head, but here's what, here's the simple story. And she's like, I just trained on all the electronics on a 747, and he's telling me that I don't know enough about my car.
That's pretty funny.
Yeah, you do have some people that are really knowledgeable. It's probably women like us, right?
Yeah,
that have
exactly.
mastered their boat, learned how to fix things on their own versus hiring somebody. And to me, that's one of the best things about owning the boat is being able to fix as much as I can on my own. I usually have one or two lifelines, either my mom or Wayne, since they're in the same neighborhood. But there is a nice satisfaction knowing that you could take the boat on your own. If anything happens, you could fix 70% of it on your own, at least diagnose it and know where to go next. And I think that's really important. Margie, are you still there? Did we lose Margie? Okay. So Pat, what are some great stories that you can share with us with your Transpac?
Oh gosh, there were so many stories. I guess at the very beginning, Diane, Captain Murray, who also works at Farallon, her and I did the Transpac together. And so we both had fears that we didn't share with one another. My fear was that we would never make it to the start or that we'd have a horrible start. And Diane's fear was that she would hit a whale. But we didn't tell one another this. So of course, as life would have it, or how we create our own lives probably, we go to the start of the race, and just as we're coming around to Point Furman, where the race starts, you leave from Rainbow Harbor. I get a phone call from my brother that says my little dog, which you guys all know, the second little dog, but it's so part of my life, had run away when they shot the guns off for the start of the race. So I just had a nervous breakdown, basically. Diane looks at me like, oh my God, we can't go to sea with you like this. So we turn around, we go back and we find the dog and we get back in our boat, redline it to the start now, because we kind of got behind on everything. We check in at the start, the committee boat, check in. We make the turn around the committee boat to the start line. The gun goes off. We raise our sails and we're the first ones over the line. Which was like so awesome because we had practiced everything. We'd practiced flying the chute, every point of sail, all the downwind stuff. But we never practiced the start. Diane kept saying, it's 2 weeks, which doesn't make if you're, off the start. But I didn't want to be the last one off. And then we're about 10 days out and I'm down below charting and Diane screams, come up, come up, come up. And I come up and she hard over to starboard, and here basking in the sun were two like 70-foot sperm whales. And, if she hadn't been right on it, we would have hit the whales. So, just on so many great experiences. If you ever have a chance to do Hawaii, it's really one of the best sails. Coming back's a little trickier, but going is really a hoot.
So how'd you get into, or how would someone get into something like the Transpac?
Well, basically there's a couple of 3 races that you have to qualify, long distance offshore. And then probably the biggest challenge was getting the boat ready. I think there were 50 pages of regulations, things you had to do for weights and balances, and emergency out of a complete replaceable rudder system. You had to have backup lights, backup this, backup hand pumps. Everything had to be labeled with the name of your boat. So if it flips over upside down, they can see that it's Charmed Life is the boat. But yeah, I think the biggest challenge is in the preparation. And then once you qualify, you go for it. I suggest maybe one person on board that's done it before.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point. So has anybody else sailed to Hawaii that's on the panel?
Yes.
Oh.
I did.
So is that Eva?
Yes.
Could you tell us about your experience?
It was a little bit of both. I did not do the race, but we sailed to Hilo and from San Francisco. And as we pulled out of the slip-in Sausalito, it was a passport 57 or something like this, 52. Somebody just for fun said, yeah, I hope your water tanks are filled. And we realized, no, they were not filled. And we had to go back into the slip. The whales that were sleeping, and I was on the bow. And the only thing I recall is that we were going very slow. They were not offended. That awful smell that you got, that breath when you were there. And then by looking backwards, I just saw, oh, they're still hanging out and we didn't offend them. Of course, we had to haul out, making sure that everything was fine once we got to Hilo.
And how many days did it take you?
I believe it was 19 days because we hit the high and spent prolonged times there. Then we had some issues with the main. We couldn't use that. So we basically ran a reefed spinnaker, meaning that we used a suck. It was not very comfortable when you had a gust of wind coming through and so on, squalls coming and so on. The lines are not prepared on a spinnaker to have that kind of stress being reefed. It was not the nicest thing at those moments, but it was outside coming from Africa. It was absolutely an incredible trip. I love passage making much more than inside the bay.
Yeah, it really is a wonderful experience.
Yeah. Yeah. So for those of you who don't know, Eva Tanner is actually my mother.
Yay.
So when she did the passage from Cape Town, South Africa to Florida, I was really envious. And
Yeah.
that was probably the thing that drove me the most to get my captain's license. It's like, okay, I want that
Oh my
opportunity.
goodness.
I want to be able to go out and do that. Not necessarily be a captain because I don't have that experience for that type of passage to be a captain, but definitely crew.
Neat.
Knowledge, that's what you get.
So Margie, are you on?
I think I am. Can you hear me?
Great.
There
So nice to have you. And do you have video also?
Yes.
All right. Nice to see your smiling face. So can you talk, yesterday you talked a little bit about giving back to the community and mentorship when we were talking with you and Peter. Let's talk a little about mentorship and mentoring other women in boating or sailing, power boating, captain. Can you share a little bit of experience that you have?
Yeah, before I was able to get on here, and I'm so sorry that it took so long, but one of the things that I wanted to jump in on was when you were talking about women who are maybe less enthusiastic than their partners. And I've spoken at a couple of conferences from time to time, and one of the things that I inevitably hear is, well, I'm only here because of him, you know, this is his dream. And one of the things that I like to do is try to encourage women to find their own dream on a boat. You know, I'm a living example. You don't have to grow up sailing to be a cruiser, to be a sailor or a yachtsman. You just have to embrace it. And what I always try to tell women is, you know, find your space. If you're a photographer, make that your passion. There's nothing better. You know, you've got endless opportunities. If you're a craftsperson, make that your passion. If you're a writer, if you can work remotely, and then claim your space on the boat. You know, I have a space where I write because I was in PR, so I was able to, even though we were traveling around the world, I was able to pick up a few jobs, and so I had my space. And you know, if you have, you know, claim it, and that will make all the difference. And the other thing in terms of volunteering, when Peter and I were sailing in as many ports as we could, in every port, we tried to we tried to find some way that we could help in the community, whether it was volunteering at a school. We would just walk into schools and say, hey, we just got off a boat, we're traveling around the world. Would you like to talk to the kids? And they were always thrilled. We did beach cleanup projects. We one day in Vanuatu, Peter volunteered to fix a generator, and the next thing we know, there were 5 generators lined up. We did reading programs at schools. There's so many opportunities to get involved, and I think this it appeals to both partners, obviously, but I think this is something that does appeal to women, and it's something that you can do and make a real contribution while you're cruising.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Lots of many ways to give back to the community, no matter where you are.
Mhm.
Yes.
So does anybody have any specific female events, activities that they like to host, or take women out sailing, or any?
I've participated in the Island Yacht Club Women's Sailing Seminar for the past 6 years, and it's always such a wonderful experience. It's put on by Island Yacht Club by all women for women. So every single class is taught by a woman, whether it be diesel maintenance or flying a spinnaker, just even learning the basics from another woman. And it's so well received, and there's so much camaraderie with that. And as an extension to that, then at my yacht club that I'm a part of, I do a ladies cruise out every year. And so the ladies get a chance to practice and being in charge and getting the boat out and taking over. And that was the whole purpose of getting it started. It was started by somebody else besides me. And the point is to get women out there and get them using their boat. And so we've had some women that really have come into their own just because it's like, well, I want to take my boat next year. So I'm going to practice and I'm going to learn what I can so that I can do that. And I can go with a group and feel safer about it. Somebody will be there to help me dock. So
That's awesome. What yacht club is that out of, Michelle?
it's Oakland Yacht Club.
And so how would other women find out about that?
Well, we have a website, oaklandyachtclub.com. And if they would just drop a line to the general manager or call. If you call the office, you'll get usually either Adam or Ben, and they know my name. They'll tell you if you just say, hey, I'm interested in ladies sailing, they'll say, oh, we'll get you in touch with Michelle. So you can email them or call them and we'll get you involved.
I guess I'll have to join you because you don't have any power boaters, right? Sailors.
Geli, can I give a shout out to 2 Facebook pages?
Yes.
2 Facebook pages that I think are invaluable is one is Women Who Sail. WWS, just go on Facebook, Women Who Sail. This is this site exploded. It's only been up for a couple of years, and they have I don't know how many thousands of followers. But someone talked about, I think Michelle, there's no stupid question, and there's no question that they can't answer. And it's the most wonderful source of information. I go there almost every day. I participate when possible, and really, really helpful. Women Who Sail. And the other site for those families out there is Sailing Totem. There's a Facebook page, Sailing Totem, TOTEM. It's run by Bian and Jamie Gifford, and they wrote the seminal book, Voyaging with Kids. So anybody who's interested in taking their family cruising, that's a great source.
That's great. So that's Women Who Sail, WWS, and Sailing Totem.
Yes.
Those are great recommendations, Margie. Again, for everybody who's just tuning in, this is the women's perspective. And we have 5 women from the Bay Area that have volunteered to speak on this panel. So do we have any questions?
So Geli, I have a group that I would like to also put a little plug in for, and it's the Alameda Community Sailing Center. They're located on the east side of Alameda over by Encinal High School. just behind Ensenada High School. It's a kind of a startup. They've been at it for about 7 years, I think now. And they have a woman director. And if you get in touch with Alameda Community Sailing Center and you have 3 or 4 women that would like to take lessons, they'll put together an all women's class for you. They're a great group. They're very flexible. Emily is one of the best teachers on the water, whether it be male or female. She's just fantastic, and she's in charge of it. Emily Zignoni. The lessons are a little cheaper than what you might find at some of the big names like Club Nautique and OCSC or Tradewinds. They're a little bit cheaper, and they're just very hands-on. And like I said, they'll put together a women's class for you. They might not always advertise it, but they'll do it. And you learn in small boats, which is always what I've said, is start in a small boat, and it's so easy to move up to a bigger one.
Right.
But check it out,
Okay.
Alameda Community Sailing Center. It's sailalameda.com.
And do you need a membership for that, Michelle?
No, absolutely not. At Oakland Yacht Club, you would need to be a member, although we welcome a lot of people on the side just to try us out. But at Alameda Community Sailing Center, it is a community sailing center. It is a nonprofit. And so they're also accepting donations. But they're a great little group. They don't have a lot of money behind them yet, but they've got a great little spot that's been reserved on the east end of Alameda to grow into.
That's great. Thanks for sharing that.
There's also a pretty fun group down in Newport Beach at the first Saturday of every February. And they do a couple hundred gals, and it's at the Bahia Corinthian Yacht Club in Newport Beach. And we've taught there for years. It's 20 years, but it's a real fun group, and it's a fun little adventure to go down for the weekend, down to Newport. So
Yeah, I love
First
Newport
February.
Beach,
Yeah.
especially I went into, what is the Duffy boats?
Oh yeah,
Yeah. I could spend all day down there.
it's a good place.
Yeah,
Good weather.
right. Perfect weather. Doesn't rain in Southern California.
No.
So Eva, can you talk about some of the women events that you've hosted?
Women events that I participate. If I get the question right, what I take annually out, this has been, I would say, I think 30 years now, a group of women that started on our 31 foot to 4 30 years ago, just going shopping from Emery Cove to Sausalito. Those were co-workers. For 31 years, I worked in the medical profession. And it turns out that the same women, after 30 some years, we are still going out, except nobody wants to go shopping. We're all sailing and
Perfect.
just totally enjoying ourselves. And some would like to learn more about it, and others are just enjoying being out on the bay and the camaraderie, because our topics are very different than if you incorporate a male conversation into it. It's a different atmosphere.
So what happens to, like, where does dad go on those days?
Yeah, I'd have to go to the movie or go out with another husband. But he's basically boatless on that day. And he gets to come back and enjoy whatever is left over from the food, because we have a huge spread that we either heave to or drop the anchor or whatever the weather conditions are. Sometimes we can't eat because it's lively, because when we set the day, that's when we're going to go, if rain or shine.
It's like fun.
Geli, can
How did
I-
you get invited to that?
We sort of grew. Somebody's sister wanted to come, so it started off with 6, and then I think we're almost 9, and it's getting a bit tight. I have to sometimes turn down somebody else's sister, because even if my own twin sister comes, it's just like, do I have enough space? Because I need to have life jackets, I need to have this, and I need to move around, and we have a spacious boat, but you do have to keep a crowd control.
Absolutely.
Right.
It won't happen this year with social distancing unless that eases up.
Yeah.
Well, they're talking about easing it up a little bit, so we'll see. Hopefully we can continue to flatten the curve. I know that's on everybody's minds right now, but it's great if you have a boat or have access to a boat. It's I think Michelle was talking about yesterday how she went out and was able to take a friend of hers, and they were able to social distance and spend a day out in the bay. So it's nice to be able to take your home and get out there.
Absolutely.
So one of the
Sailed over to
stories,
Sausalito last weekend.
pardon me?
We sailed over to Sausalito last weekend. It was lovely. It was so great to be able to take your home and move somewhere else and get a different perspective. Wonderful day out. Screamed all the way back. 8.5 knots. It was amazing.
Wow. And what kind of boat again do you have again, Margie?
We have a Tiana 47.
Tiana 47.
To chime in, you were asking about things you can do and what does the husband do? I'm here to tout cruising, and what I want people to know is in terms of women, when we were all around the world in the mornings, we'd get together on a net, and there was always some plan to go somewhere, whether it was shopping or going sightseeing or whatever. The women would get off the boat and we'd take our dinghies and we'd go and spend a day. And after a while, the partners and the husbands got so upset that Peter organized an event just for the men. It was
Of course.
and all the guys got together, and this was in Mexico. They all got together and they made arrangements with a barber, the old time barber that does the razor thing, and they brought a bottle of tequila, and they all took turns. They gave the barber only one shot, but they all took turns having a shot and a shave. And so we would go out, we'd do our things. Sometimes it would be something luxurious like a spa. Sometimes it would be just hanging out and having a drink, or going to a museum. But I'm here to say that there's a lot of camaraderie and in the cruising world, and women hold their own.
That reminds me, when I live on the Grand Banks 42, and when I first purchased it about 5 years ago now, I started bubble night. So that's not out in the middle of the bay, obviously, because you need to be safe. But it was just women. We did it every Wednesday. That's the middle of the work week. And we started with just bubbles, but we quickly realized we needed to have food as well.
Thank you.
So we went to cheese and crackers. Then eventually one of the women said, we probably should have a full meal. So then everybody started rotating and cooking meals. And we did that for about 3 years, every Wednesday for about 3 years, saved the courts. But similar story to you, Margie, where one of the men felt left out and had a card party on his boat, but it never quite worked out. We were separate. We ended up doing either women or the couples, but it was fun. And the bubbles changed to cocktails when it was with the guys, but it was still fun.
Sounds great.
So do you have any questions from people who joined? Any other interesting stories to add? Margie, Michelle?
When I was preparing for this seminar, not knowing exactly what I was going to be asked to say, we have stories. We have 44 countries and 42,000 miles under our belt. So I've got stories from all over the place. But I thought that what I wanted to say most is I think I was really impressed by the book Sheryl Sandberg wrote, the chief financial officer of Facebook, and she wrote a book called Lean In. And the message I always want to give to women is to really to lean into this idea of cruising, and you don't have to start out big. Of course we want you to drive the boat, but start by learning how to drive the dinghy. I have to tell you, I met women around the world who were cruising and didn't know how to drive the dinghy. It horrified me. But start small. Learn how to drive the dinghy. Learn how to change a spark plug, learn how to use the VHF and the SSB. I mean, these are really important, really simple, but you know, you can be the communicator. You know, learn how to change a Raycor filter. These are simple things. I can't repair the engine, but I'm there to help. Watch everything. But the first time someone says to you, well, I've shown you this, you've seen me do this 1,000 times. I always say to Peter, you know, yeah, but I got to do it first. You know, you could show me 1,000 more, but I have to do it in order for me to learn. And you know, take charge of your boating experience, your cruising experience. The more you learn, the more fun it'll be.
Right. That's a good point, is getting in and learning how to do it yourself, being hands-on, asking the questions. I think that's one of the things that when I was crew on a delivery from San Diego or Ocean Beach to Emeryville, the weather forecast was off. And so I had to watch, I think it was from 12 to 3 in the morning, and the winds kicked up. It was a little tiny 32-foot boat, no bimini, no autopilot. Thank goodness my mother was there, because I needed that moral support afterwards. but you couldn't see anything. All of a sudden, everything was pitch black. Couldn't see the lights on the right. And the boat just felt like it was going to Nebraska or Hawaii. And I felt like we were going more towards Hawaii. And I opened up the hatch. We didn't have a GPS. So I opened up a hatch real quick to take a look at my Navionics, which I had on my iPad. And the wind was so strong, so I couldn't have that in the cockpit with me. And so I opened up the hatch. I grabbed it to look just to make sure we were still on course. And my mother said, "Oh, Geli, is everything okay?" I said, "Yeah, fine." And I should have just said, I need help. So, Muti, you want to take over from there? You can finish the story.
It was a small boat, and you couldn't have anything out on instruments, your iPad, because it was raining to boot with. And I just felt, I woke up because as you said, we went from east to west and too often. And so I came out, and the first thing that is, Geli, slow down the boat, collect yourself, slow it down, because it was just like we were under the engine, we had the wind, we couldn't raise the sail because it was in such bad shape, this kind of delivery, but we needed to slow down the boat, get control, and reassess everything. And she did fine. It's just a panic button. So I just felt like it was really cool. You teach a kid how to walk. So not just only did I watch her take her first steps, but I also saw some of the other parts of slowing down.
And that's a lesson I think that stayed with me. All it's docking, anytime out in the bay, anytime there's any uncertainty or whatever, it's just slow it down. So that was a life lesson, because usually you just, in my nature, you just want to go. Running a manufacturing plant, you're just the soldier out in the field, you drive forward.
Right.
So you can't really do that on a boat. You gotta take a different approach.
It is a really a great source of, I think, accomplishment, you know, feeling good about yourself when you get in a really difficult situation and you pull through it and you realize, I can do that. You know, we got caught in a gale coming back from Hawaii, and, you know, I had a ditch bag under one arm and the EPIRB under the other arm, and doing my Hail Marys, act of contrition, hoping that we would make it. But, you know, once we got through it, 45, 50 knot winds sustained, 25-foot seas for 36 hours. And you get through it, and I think, I'm never going out the gate again. I'm never getting on a sailboat again. And then you live through it, you get back and you think, I did that. I survived. And I can do this again. So in fact, we had a group a few years back of brand new Catalina owners. They all bought brand new boats and they were going cruising, and there were 8 of us, and we went down every year in July. Catalina has a rendezvous at Catalina Island. So we took a group of 8 boats, and a lot of them had never been out the gate before, husband and wives, and we we all made the pact that we weren't going to bring anybody else. It was just going to be the couples that were going to go cruising. And a lot of the gals, never been out the gate and really very fearful. But once we got out there and we made it to Catalina, they felt so good about themselves. It was a life-changing experience for them, because they did something that was out of their comfort zone, but they accomplished it. And you realize, I always look around the marinas and you see, 1,000 sticks sitting out there. And I think all those people can't be smarter than me. And that's what they learned. They learned about their boat. They learned being on their own with their husbands and wives. And it was a wonderful experience, and they're out cruising still.
Right. You just reminded me, there's a couple of, two couples actually that came to know in the last 5-7 years, and they were scared of being at sea overnight, like that first night watch. What do you expect? And so their husbands would stay in the cockpit with them, so they're right there. And to me, that's my favorite
Mine
part.
too. Yeah.
It's just, you're by yourself. You can hear the boat cutting through the water. There's no Facebook, Instagram. Nobody can call you. Nobody can email you.
Nobody can tell you what to do. So
yeah, to make the best use of those 3 hours. Yeah. But it was nice to see those women that went out and they hear their stories as I was following them on Facebook and Instagram as they gain their confidence. So, after the first week, they got down to Half Moon Bay. That was a big step. A monumental step was to Half Moon Bay, then to Monterey. Okay, now we're going to go down to Southern California. Okay, now we're going to go back to Emeryville. And then 2 years later, they left.
Yeah.
And they went cruising. So it's great to see that their experience grow, their confidence grow, that they enjoyed it. It wasn't just their partner's thing. It was their thing as well, as Margie touched on earlier.
Yeah, that's great.
Geli?
Yes. Margie?
Talking about the watches. I'm more of a night owl, so I would always take the 10 to 2 watch, because I can't sleep anyway. So, and I loved the night watches. But when we first started out, I think Peter maybe was more nervous than I was, and so we'd be sailing, and I'd be sailing between 10 and 2, and his head would pop up through the hatch. He'd be in the stateroom and aft, and every little thing, if I'd make an adjustment to the sail, his head would pop up, and I felt like it was like this whack-a-mole thing, and I'm fine, and so, but it takes time. The night watches are terrific, and people always say, I don't want to sail at night. We want to find an anchorage before we have to do a night sail. And I agree, it's one of the most pleasant experiences. And the other thing a little is that what we did with our boat, especially for me learning sailing, cruising, we would always practice what ifs. If we're sailing along and nothing's happening, what if I fell overboard? Certainly practice a drill, but just talk through it. Just talk through it. What are you going to do now? What if you see a storm? What if you see something? Well, you reef down. Practice those things. What if this happens? What if that happens? It just helps your confidence grow, that you're gradually knowing what to do. And hopefully you never have to use it, but do you know how to deploy your life raft? What if this happens? What do you do? Makes you feel much more confident.
Right, good point. So always, again, the asking, what if?
Right.
What if?
I had somebody come to the women's sailing seminar, an older woman, slight build, and she and her husband had had a boat for just a few months. And she came to the seminar, and as we went through, what did you want to learn? She said, well, my husband sent me to this so I can learn how to save him in a man overboard. And I'm like, do you know how to sail? Do you know how to do any? She's like, no, I just go along and, you know, he lets me drive sometimes. And I'm like, and you think you're going to learn that in one weekend, right? In 2 days. And I just looked at her and I said, you know what? That I cannot even begin to give you those skills in one weekend. I said, what you're going to learn is how to stop the boat and how to use the radio. Those are the 2 things, the minimal that you need to know to save yourself or somebody else, is because you're not going to have the skills to turn around and do a man overboard drill when you don't know the boat. Just stop the boat, get some help, know how to use the radio. And it's amazing how many women don't take the time to learn how to use the radio, which is the most important thing on a boat. If you're not a sailor, or if you're not in charge of the boat or know what to do, know how to use the radio if you can't do anything else.
That's a good point. I think about that when I'm out, you have somebody with you that's not as skilled, you know, so you got to think ahead when you're docking if something happens.
Mm-hmm.
What's the best way to communicate to that person calmly, you know?
Oh, calmly.
Yeah. How to throw the line, right? And actually practice before you leave the dock. How do you throw the line to a person? What happens if the engine fails, you know, and you have to leave the helm? Can they maintain the position? You know, do they know how to, like, I have twin engines. Can they maintain that position?
Mm-hmm.
Do they know how to get the boat into neutral?
Yeah.
You know? So key points. So we're almost out of time. Is there any more questions? I guess we're asked to keep going.
I actually have a survey
Okay.
that I need to leave.
Right.
So it was wonderful meeting with all you guys, and to the audience, I hope that you have the opportunity to get out on the boats and learn as much. The more equal partners you are in boating, I think the better it really is. You know, it makes it more fun and more empowering if you learn to do all aspects of sailing, even though we tend to want to start off slowly. I think if you take it on, and when we sell a new boat, we always include lessons with that, 2 or 3 lessons with both the husband and the wife together. And when during those lessons, we always work very hard at communication, because that's always a challenging part of learning to sail, for couples especially. But we really try to empower you, the women, to take every aspect of the sailing experience and learn it. And you'll find that it's more fun. The more you know, the more fun it is. And the more you share together, I think the better experience you'll have. And you'll probably be out solo sailing in no time at all. Thank you, everyone. I'm sorry I have a survey. So
Thank you, Patty. And good luck with your survey.
Geli,
Yes.
can I just say before I say goodbye, and this was really fun, thank you for organizing this. I want to give a plug for anyone. Tomorrow, my husband and I are, or Sunday at 12:30, we're going to do a presentation on our circumnavigation. And there's a lot of good information for women specifically, or couples, or whoever would be interested in long-term cruising. And we do have a number of segments which apply to the communication between partners. So I hope to see a lot of people on Sunday at 12:30.
Excellent. Look forward to seeing you on Sunday with you and Peter. Eva, do you have anything else you'd like to add?
I would just put a plug into learning the self-reliance, and those are available classes. I took classes from KKMI, for example. They gave at one point diesel maintenance. Nigel Calder has excellent books and seminars that I have attended, electrical as well as diesel. I think you get more comfortable the more you expose yourself to do experts like that. And of course, then hanging out in the bilge or over your engine with your own mechanic, if you got a good relationship, and just have your hands in there and
Good point. Yeah, stay involved and take advantage of any learning opportunities as you can. I want to thank everybody for being a part of the Women's Perspective panel. Again, that was Pat Garfield, Margie Benziger, Eva Tanner, and Michelle Leonard. And hope you guys can stay on for the rest of the boat show. And thanks again for joining us. Now we'll turn it over to a video of Catalina with Jerry.